Sing livecast, livecast. Welcome to the livecast. I'm sure we are live now. Hello, my name is Glen Scrivener. Welcome, everybody. I'm here in our studios in Eastbourne, and joining me in Crowborough is the very wonderful Paul Feesey. Say hello to the people.
Hello, everybody. How are you all doing? Don't know why I'm saying that. They're not going to respond, are they? Like, I hope.
Well, they might. Why don't
true.
people say something?
We're live. It's been so long since we've been live. People can actually respond, and I forget that. That means we have to be more careful what we say now.
Yes. No, there's no editing after the fact.
Not at all.
It's So please no swearing, Paul. Please, this time.
I'll try and limit it a little bit.
Yeah, keep it as safe for work. Why don't you? Today we're going to talk about what everyone in church is talking about, and that is how weird it is to meet, what we're able to do, what we're not able to do, some of the strengths of meeting together, some of the frustrations of meeting together. And I guess my first question for you, Paul, is have you met together physically? And if so, what was it like?
Yeah, I've been 3 times actually yesterday. We're only supposed to go once, but I was preaching in the morning and in the evening, the first service of the day and the last service, and then I also went with my family at 11 o'clock. So yeah, I've been, and it's a different experience, that's for sure. Each service I went to just felt quite different in terms of how I came away from it. So in the first one, I went in, I had my mask on. I was having some issues with steaming up in my glasses. And I was just thinking like, oh man, like this is not good. And it didn't feel great. And also there weren't a huge amount of people there. So it felt a little bit, I'd assumed that everybody would just book their places and want to be there. So there was a sense in which I was a little bit kind of underwhelmed by the whole thing. And, we had to sing, we weren't allowed to sing songs, but we hummed.
Did you hum? Yes.
Yeah, we did humming at that one. Now, when we went to the next service, which was the family service, we could hum, but actually we were doing Macathon signing for the songs, which was actually good. We do a lot of Macathon stuff anyway, for particular songs.
For those who don't know what Macathon is, can you explain?
It's a form of sign language. I think it's kind of used generally with kind of young years. So if you've got kids and you ever see Mr. Tumble, like it's that, I think.
Yep.
He uses it. So we were using that, and actually, like I would say that when you're trying to sing a song and do that, I always found that quite difficult. But when you're actually not having to sing and you can just focus on the signing, actually it was quite a useful thing. And actually a lot of people kind of quite got into it. So we had that service, but interestingly, the thing I was really looking forward to was seeing people and talking to people afterwards. Now, obviously, you're not allowed to congregate in the building and you've got to get out. But I kind of assumed that we'd all just spill out onto the kind of green, which is outside our church, and people would mill around and chat. But interestingly, everybody just went straight home. I don't know whether it was because people just weren't sure really what they were allowed to do and kind of felt like, oh, we've just got to go and that's the rules. But myself and Becca, we kind of got home and we were quite disappointed by that, to be honest. We felt like we'd had better fellowship with people over Zoom after YouTube videos than we had in the service, which felt like a shame. But then I went in the evening where I was preaching again, and actually that was a bit more chilled because we had a bit more time. It wasn't you weren't on a rota to get through and get another service in afterwards. And actually, it's a different kind of crowd anyway. But actually people did stay around or outside afterwards when people were going back to their cars, kind of in the car park and on the pavement. People were just stopping and chatting, and I had a good chat with some people for, kind of 20, 30 minutes actually. And that was really nice. It was a bit of a mixed bag in terms of experience. Yeah. But I wonder whether some of that is just first week back, people weren't quite sure what can we do, right. What can't we do?
Right.
But on the whole, positive.
Yeah. Oh, it's great. It's great to meet with God's people, isn't it? And it is odd that you can hum, but you can like, in an Anglican setting, there was liturgy and there was, this is the word of the Lord, thanks be to God. And we were saying the grace to one another, but we couldn't sing. We could hum, but we couldn't sing. And,
I guess the theory behind it is that when you sing, there's this kind of greater expulsion of air going on. But I think whoever made that rule has never heard Anglicans sing.
No.
So It's different in a charismatic church, probably. They're much more
Are
enthusiastic.
there ways of singing where you inhale? Like,
try it.
Grace, how sweet the sound. I mean, that could be really fortifying of the saints, don't you think? Wouldn't
Wow.
Why not? I mean, it's safe.
This is a headphone warning for people. This is a good example of something that would have got left on the cutting room floor in the edit.
I have wondered, isn't the time ripe for an app where you put your phone inside your mask and you just sing quite quietly, but it actually broadcasts, and maybe if you fit it with auto tune as well, so that we're all actually.
If you build it, Glenn. If you build it,
I think so.
People will download it.
I'm always looking for an angle, little side hustle. But yeah, we've had a couple of evening services. We haven't yet braved all age services with kids yet, and that sort of thing. But yeah, I mean, it's odd. You're indoors for a certain length of time. I think 45 minutes is the recommendation or whatever. And so when we leave, it's kind of like school assembly. You kind of no talking, and out you go. And we sort of spilled out into the car park. And it's interesting because I thought, hey, isn't this great? What a witness it is to, for the town to look on and see, there's churches together and they're congregating and they're back in business. But then, of course, other people saying, understandably, well, it depends what kind of witness it is. If we're all properly socially distanced, it's a good witness. If it's not, then it's not a good witness. And there's just so many extra things we're having to consider right now.
Just a quick note before you carry on. You might want to just back off your mic gain very slightly. You're a little hot, but not hugely, but just occasionally you're getting into the realms of distortion. Yes. Our services, because we had this 8:30 and then there was a 10 and an 11:15, I think it was. They were very much billed as, you're going to have, the 10 and the 11:15 were going to be half an hour. So that was all it was, because they were going to get people in, get them out, clean, start again, that kind of thing. Actually, we found with the kids, because they are going to start kids work again in September, I think, in some form. I'm not sure exactly how it's going to look. But the kids were fine for half an hour. We took actually the services are billed as all age, so they are they were doing some songs and bits and bobs that involved the kids. But the kids had their colouring pads or whatever with them as well. And, I know a few people have said, oh, we're a bit worried about bringing the kids because of, will they sit through it? At least for us, it was a short amount of time. So I don't think it's a huge issue, but we've also got a 4-month-old and we kind of turned up beforehand and said, what do we do if she starts crying? Like, where can we go? Because we know we can't go in this space or that place anymore. And they basically just said, it's just the way it is, isn't it? Just let her cry. People have to deal with it. Like,
right.
It's church. They were like, so they said there's no crash running, so people will just have to deal with it, and that's the way it is. I was like, okay, yeah, that seems fair.
If you're on a Zoom chat, you'd be finding the mute button. Oh
yeah, but, totally hitting the mute button. But
where's the mute button on my 4-month-old? Yeah. What we really need is a snooze button on children. I think that would be
would be nice. Yes.
Kids are great, but I think with the 2.0 update, if we could just find a snooze button, please.
Absolutely.
And what do we make of? Because there's courage needed and there's wisdom needed, it seems to me, at these times, because every congregation is has within it people who on the one hand tune into Unheard and Lockdown TV and are sort of lockdown skeptics, and everyone and there's also people in the congregations who have literally hermetically sealed their houses and haven't left since March.
Yep.
How do we get that balance right between having the courage to, I'm always struck by, in Proverbs, it's the sluggard who says, there's a lion in the streets. And there can be a sense psychologically of the more you retreat from fearful things, the more fearful you become.
Yeah.
And it becomes this vicious cycle. And you've got the Israelites saying in Numbers, there are giants in the land. We can't go across because there are giants in the land, or there's a lion in the streets. So there is that issue. Sometimes there can be a lack of courage, but also there can be a lack of wisdom.
Sure.
If you blunder into things. So in Proverbs, you've also got this sense of, a fool, a fool does not heed wisdom, but, keeps on going. and is destroyed, whereas a wise person takes advice. So yeah, how do we navigate between courage and wisdom?
Yeah. I mean, I think it's tricky, isn't it? I mean, like I say, my assumption was probably because I assume in my own head that I'm fairly representative of people.
Of course.
Because of course we all do.
You're the golden mean.
Absolutely.
Paul. Everyone else is a deviation from you.
Average Joe. I kind of, like I said, I kind of assumed everybody would be chomping at the bit to get back. And that's why I was quite surprised to look around, particularly at that first service. I suppose it's two predominantly elderly, more older congregations that in the morning at that time. So maybe that might have influenced it a bit. But like I said, I assume people would be chomping at the bit to get back. I was a bit surprised that it wasn't absolutely kind of packed in this as much as it could be.
It's very interesting to me, different experiences of risk and different attitudes to risk. There are some people who are very happy with risky behavior, and there are some people who are incredibly risk averse. And how do we navigate those two things? So the thing I sometimes think about is that the older brother, younger brother kind of mentalities, because the interesting thing in Luke 15 is that in Luke 15 both kinds of mentality are wrong. The father's kind of humanity is the right kind of humanity, and the older brother and younger brother are these natural temperaments that we all have. So there are some people who are very, very happily, they will walse into the far country no matter what happens. And there are some people who are just happy, confining themselves to the field. And both of them are kind of wrong. But there's another kind of conceptuality that people have been considering, and I think a lot of people have been talking in terms of stronger brother, weaker brother stuff. Have you come across that kind of conceptualizing of these different attitudes to risk? We seem to be having some technical difficulties. How's it coming across, Jerome? Was the stuff that I've just been saying coming across? Yeah. Okay. So the problem is all at Paul Feesey's end, as
problems in my end. What are you saying?
The problem is with Paul Feesey, constantly.
I apologize.
So did you hear the stuff I was saying about, sometimes people talk about Romans 14 and there's stronger brothers and weaker.
But I know the general gist of what you're talking about.
Yeah. Same old. So
did you make the joke about? Did you make the joke about the Unshine Coast yet? Have you done that bit?
Respawn. It's got. What is it? But all the shop windows are bifocal. Boom. Anyway, Paul, as I was saying, So some people have been talking about these different attitudes to risk in terms of there are stronger brothers and weaker brothers, and therefore some who are very emboldened to do stuff no matter what the regulations say, and some people who might be a bit more scrupulous. How do we think about that as a way of understanding these different attitudes to risk with COVID-19?
I mean, I don't know. I mean, I think on the surface, maybe it seems like it ties up some sense, but then I wonder if you push a little bit deeper. I mean, I think you have to delve a bit more into exactly what it was that the weaker brother is concerned about, and I think the context isn't more to do with the law, like issues of things like that.
Yes,
Mosaic law.
Yeah, the Mosaic law rather than
Boris. Yeah. So I'm not sure. I mean, perhaps there's a general idea behind it that of course we should be mindful of others.
Right.
Whether that passage itself is speaking particularly to the situation, I don't know.
Right. It seems like in Romans 14 and 15, you've got these very specific issues of, some people consider every day alike, and some people are observing special days. Some people are vegetarian, and some people eat all kinds of meat. What's the other issue? Anyway, these issues of really, do we keep kosher? Basically, do we maintain these boundary markers of old Israel? even as we've come into the community of the church. And the stronger brother is the one who, they'll eat anything, and there's no special days, and they'll drink wine. That's the other stronger brother thing.
Yep.
Whereas the weaker brother is like, oh, not so sure. And so in one sense, it's pointing to some kind of temperamental attitude to risk, but also the kind of laws, as you say, the kind of laws that are being either obeyed or not. In Romans 14, it's about Moses' laws as opposed to the laws of the land. And while the laws of Moses have been put to death and raised up again in Christ in the New Testament, the laws of the land we're still under, and actually Romans 13 might be a more appropriate place to go, because there are laws of the land, and they are to be obeyed. But then there are other issues where there are recommendations that come from on high, and then what is our attitude to the law at that stage? And then we've got the instance of John MacArthur over in California. I guess he's had 2 Sundays back meeting at Grace Community Church, and it was interesting. I don't know when you first saw like a photograph of Grace Community Church meeting, whenever it was, about 9 days ago. But I remember someone tweeted out just this photograph of 1,000 people inside the auditorium, when the California state governor had said that you cannot have indoor meetings of that size, and because of social distancing, and everyone needs, and if you're indoors, you need to wear masks and all that sort of thing. But John MacArthur wrote an article saying we obey Christ, not Caesar, and then met. And I don't know what your reaction to the photo was, Paul, but when I saw it, like the first thing I thought was, whoa. In kind of almost in the same way that like when I'm watching TV at the moment and I see like people on screen are not socially distanced, I'm like, whoa, they're totally breaking the rules. And it felt like freedom. But then instantly I just thought, oh, I really hope there's not a spike in numbers. Around their church, because the odds of an asymptomatic carrier of COVID-19 being in their midst is fairly high when you're dealing with 1,000+ people. Yep. I don't know how you reacted to Grace Community Church.
Yeah, I mean, I think mine was more on the side of just like, oh no, like why? Why are you doing this? Just that it didn't seem very wise to me to be acting that way. And the in terms of, I don't feel it's a great witness personally, that it looks like a group of Christians saying, yeah, we don't really care about the impact this might have on other people. We just want to do what we want to do. Stuff you. We're gonna do it. And I mean, whether or not that is the attitude behind it, that is definitely, I think, how it would come across. And let's be honest, the evangelical church in the States doesn't have a lot of goodwill to use up with the public anyway. So, doesn't seem like a great move.
Yeah. And that was the point that was made by Jonathan Lehman of 9 Marks across in Washington, D.C. He said, we're gonna need some capital, some social capital for the fights that are ahead of us, perhaps around LGBT issues and that sort of thing. Which I thought, I don't know, I don't think the reason to do or not to do things is political like that, or tactical, strategic like that. I think if John MacArthur is indeed right, that Caesar has no jurisdiction within the church, if he is indeed correct about that, then you've got to obey God and not man. And that was the scriptural justification that he used, citing Acts 5 verse 29. Judge for yourselves whether we should obey God or you in this matter, said Peter and John in front of the Sanhedrin. I think if it is true that Caesar has absolutely no jurisdiction in the church, then I guess that's true, and the law can't tell us what to do in church. But a couple of things to push back on that, and one is, I'm quite certain that Grace Community Church has all the correct number of fire escapes and all the correct number of disabled access points and exactly the right number of, toilets for the capacity of the building. I'm quite certain that when it caters for any event, that its kitchen is up to, public health standards. And I'm quite certain that they actually abide by all sorts of laws of the land.
Yeah.
And actually, the laws of the land would have allowed them to meet outdoors. Some people say, oh, well, you can't always meet outdoors because the weather might be too hot or too cold and that sort of thing. Well, sure, but actually the weather's just fine around Grace Community Church at this time of year. So I don't think it's actually true that Caesar was preventing them from worshiping on that Lord's Day. And it's not true that the church is being singled out in a way that others aren't. Mass gatherings are not. If it was that, then maybe we're in, really persecuted times, and I can understand why you might want to stand up against it. But for those reasons, I admired his courage, but I questioned the wisdom.
And wasn't, you'll have to correct me if I'm wrong, wasn't some of the reason given to do with, well, these are our part of our constitutional rights as Americans to be able to do these things, and like, I mean, was that?
Well, what was interesting. What was interesting is that, and maybe there's wisdom in this, but towards God's people, it was an entirely theological defense, and we're resting on Acts 4 and 5. We're resting on, Christ has lordship, not Caesar. But then when he went on Fox with Tucker Carlson, let me just play.
Yeah, good to see that.
What he said there, because at that stage it became essentially a political issue. Let's have a look.
No sound.
Oh, never mind. Anyway, on Tucker Carlson, Johnny Mac went on, and it was all about the First Amendment. It was all about freedom of speech, freedom of association, a political issue about there being no jurisdiction in these kinds of matters. And so, there was an opportunity, I thought, if you're gonna stand by what you stood by in terms of Acts 5, of going on a national platform and saying Jesus is Lord. But it became a much more political and a politicized thing at that point. So, it doesn't seem to quite tally together, does it? To say, who should we obey? Should we obey a man or should we obey Christ? And then for your reasoning to be, this is our constitutional right under these laws of man. And I think, maybe I don't think that would happen. I don't think that would be so prevalent here. I think that is quite an American thing in many ways. And I think, many Americans anyway are very much bound by their constitution. It's a huge thing for them. And I think the church is also, it's a sad to see as a Christian that the church seems so bound by, American constitution, in the sense that it almost would point to it like that, and it's a bit of an idol there for people. I mean, I'm fully in support of people who want to say, the state is encroaching on various areas of our lives. I just, and wanting to, at a political level, push back against that and retain the freedom of assembly and freedom of religion, freedom of conscience, freedom of speech. I can well understand Christians politically lobbying for all that sort of stuff, but that's not fundamentally where we draw the line. That's not fundamentally where we stand in these issues. But I did think, though, that the courage of a John MacArthur is needed, even though I might disagree with the particular place that he took the stand. And I do think we're going to have to show each other grace as different Christians respond differently to these unprecedented times. I've used the phrase, these unprecedented times. Yeah.
Yeah.
Ding.
I think the kind of the clinging. What struck me is that very much like, at least with the Tucker Carlson thing, there's this clinging to my rights kind of attitude there, which doesn't sit well with me as a Christian. Whereas I feel actually we ought to lay down our rights in certain cases if it's for the benefit of others. So, people were talked about that those Romans verses, we were talking about before, but the verses that came to mind for me was more the Philippians 2 stuff, about each of you should look not only to yourselves, to your own interest, but also to the interest of others, and your attitude should be the same as that of Christ Jesus. And then, of course, we get the great kind of little kind of hymn of Philippians 2 of Christ being the one who, though he had all this position of power and the rightfully that was his, he steps down and gives that up for the sake of others. And so I think in this case, for me, that's more the angle I would take, that yes, you've got the right to exercise your constitutional right here, but for the sake of others, because that is the loving thing to do, and because you're not being asked not to meet at all, or to have, you're not being banned from meeting or anything like that in the sense of being quashed as Christians. It is everybody, and it's for a good reason. Now, people will say, but it's the beginning of a slippery slope, I'm sure, but I just don't think I'd buy that in this circumstance. But
I think in Nevada there was a Supreme Court case about churches in Nevada were sort of more restricted than casinos. Obviously, Nevada, the home of Las Vegas, and I can understand people being upset at that stage that you're allowed to play blackjack, you're not allowed to worship on a Sunday. I can understand people getting kind of upset about that. But when the rules are the same for one as for the other, and when there is the option of meeting outdoors, there is also the creativity that is required of all sorts of Christians. For instance, in China, who once you get over 200, you really show up on the radar of the Chinese Communist Party, and so that's birthed a kind of a church planting methodology, where when churches get to a certain size, they just split and split and split and split and split. And very interestingly, the Chinese Communist Party are forcing a lot of Christians to have a very profoundly biblical ecclesiology, pastors who actually know the names of their sheep and that kind of thing. So yeah, worshiping the Lord is not outlawed. And there might be more creative ways, and maybe the Lord himself is forcing us to consider smaller gatherings, multiplying our gatherings, house churches, and life-on-life discipleship, because that's not outlawed. There are all sorts of ways that we are meant to disciple one another that do not require us to have hundreds of people in a building indoors. And if we've become overly reliant on that, maybe the Lord is pushing us into other areas of discipleship that have been neglected. It's certainly worth considering. And the other thing to say about John MacArthur is, I think the response is not to do the opposite of John MacArthur. I think the response is not to retreat and never say boo to a goose, and lock ourselves down more than what is necessary. And I do see that is a problem. And I do see temperamentally, just with individual households, it seems like as many households as broke the lockdown rules in those first 3 months, as many people actually overly locked down and locked down more than what the regulations stipulated.
Sure.
And I think that's a mistake as well. And as we said before, there's the fearfulness that becomes a vicious cycle. So I was just reminded by Jackie Lam, who is a church leader. He's also a lawyer in Hong Kong, and his church was fascinating. When it was totally against the law, they did not meet. But when there were certain stipulations that enabled them in certain circumstances to meet, they were very careful about it, and they met, even though other churches were a little bit anyway, should we have a look at the clip of Jackie Lamb, who I think trod a very wise path of both wisdom and courage. And if we've got that clip lined up, let's hear it in his own words, how he and his church in Hong Kong sought to navigate these waters.
Feel quite strongly that we should maintain the church doors to be open. But of course, there's no pressure for people to come in person. They can log in online if they'd like to. And that for anyone coming in person, that they do the usual hygiene. So they wash their hands, they come in face masks if they feel comfortable to. Hand sanitizers are provided at the door, and so forth. And we wipe down all the chairs after every meeting. And then the temperature checks are also done where we could get them done, especially for children's ministry. We still keep them open. And so all children have their temperature checked. If anyone is sick, or if anyone has traveled from the mainland, we've asked them not to attend in person. So we on the one hand, we try our best to listen to the medical policies and guidelines. On the other hand, we want to make sure that we don't completely forsake the possibility of meeting in person, because I think there is a lot of value where possible to meet in person, just because many people in our church, well, not many, I think there's a fair number in our church that if isolated for too long, it's not unheard of that they may face certain types of depression, and online doesn't resolve that. Meeting someone online doesn't really, in many ways, fulfill the true dynamic of that relationship. And so I think for many people, actually, so during this time, because many churches have closed down and we are one of the few that have still kept services running, some of their flock has come over to our church just for physical meetings. And in many ways, we've been blessed with their presence, and sort of until they return back to their church body, we welcome them where they would like to come.
Do you feel any judgment from other Christians thinking, no, this is the unloving thing to do, you could be carriers?
Yeah, absolutely. Look, I think that's it. The biggest fight we have, ironically, is not with non-believers. The biggest fight we have is with believers, because in many ways, people can adopt many views about common sense. They could say that common sense is from God. So if you're using your common sense, then you would be loving to other people by not attending in person, especially for members who have elderly parents at home. They live with their parents, and my wife and I, we don't live with our parents. So that the risk by comparison seems to be lower. So we need to be sensitive to that. There is no formula. We can't say, well, because the church doors are open, then you must come in person. And we certainly don't expect that. It's more for people to make a reasoned and prayer-filled decision before they come. And so there is no compulsion. So we make it very clear every Sunday that, please be careful, don't be reckless. We don't want to be a bad witness. And of course, every week, the same debate goes on and on. Why are our doors open? And of course, the judgment goes both ways as well. Because on the one hand, people may judge us for being unloving. On the other hand, it's very easy for churches where their doors are open to judge other churches and say, why have you closed your door? And so that's not right either.
No, it's interesting going back to.
Yeah, very interesting, and it kind of goes to a question that Paul Crowther has had on the live chat. He said that Di Hankey tweeted yesterday. He's a church leader in Wales. Di Hankey tweeted about the challenge of having Christians from other churches who are still online turning up to his church because his church is meeting in person and they want to go to an in-person gathering. What should he do with those? He feels like he doesn't want to be sheep stealing.
Sure.
But some of the flock are showing up in person because they're not getting that from their regular church. What should he do about that? Interestingly, Jackie had exactly that sort of situation, and he sort of said, well, they've been blessing us with their presence, but he will encourage them to go back to their churches when they do meet physically. I think that would be my counsel to Di Hankey as well, that okay, those people are in your presence right now and you can bless them in person, but do all that you can to encourage them to join their own flock when their own flock does meet.
Yeah, I mean, I think the thing that I like about the approach Jackie talks about there is, they're saying, well, we are going to keep going insofar as we're allowed, but we're going to take precautions. You know, we're gonna say to people, look, wear your mask. We've got hand sanitizer. If you've got any symptoms, if your temperature's up, you know, don't come. And if you've been to the mainland, you know, fine, don't come. All those things, and also don't feel under compulsion to be here. Like, and you don't have to come. That's fine. And
Right.
I think which seems slightly different to the John MacArthur church, where everyone's there with no masks and seemingly just not any real effort to distance or anything like that at all. I think that it's a very different thing. And I think there just seems like it's much more wisdom perhaps in the what's going on there in Hong Kong with Jackie Lam than perhaps in the California setting.
Yeah. When we first, I think our very first live cast about plagues and pestilence was looking at sort of historical approaches to, you know, plague, because we're not the first people to encounter pestilence. And, you know, down through history, we had a look at a whole bunch of different people, including Luther. And it was very interesting, you know, Luther saying, look, when the pestilence hit Wittenberg, he said, look, if there are people that you need to stay and take care of, then you need to stay and take care of them, no matter what the danger is. But if you don't have ties in that way, then feel free to flee. But it seemed like he was very commonly in letters having to say to people, look, some people will take one decision about whether to flee Wittenberg, and some people take a different decision about whether to stay and care for the sick. And we need to give grace to each person, you know, before each person's master, a man stands or falls, and Christ is able to make them stand. And at that stage, you know, we're back in that Romans 14 territory, that different people are going to take different positions on this. And Luther was very, very sensitive to the fact that we're always trying to find our identity and our righteousness in something that we've done, you know. And, you know, how much more is that the case these days when, you know, we find our identity in our social media updates or in our views. You know, I've got the right view about lockdown, or I've got the right view about this cause or that cause. And we so quickly latch onto that as the marker of my righteousness. And therefore, if you don't have the same thing as I have, well, you must be inferior and I've got to look down on you. But yeah, what would it take to have a true gospel sensibility where I say, actually, you know, my views on lockdown and my views on the best way that church can navigate these times, I could be totally wrong about that, but I'm right in Christ and he is my righteousness, and I'm not going to look down on anyone who takes a different decision. It's easy to say, it's hard to do, I think.
Well, yeah, and I think that's true. And I mean, I just wonder, is there a difference between the things Luther's talking about there slightly, and maybe like these two cases, the churches we just looked at, in that the Luther's talking about, there are those who will flee, who will feel like it's better to be away from where the illness is and avoid catching it, spreading it, all those things. And those who were staying to care and look after people who perhaps needed that help, couldn't look after themselves, or they were family members or whatever. Whereas the MacArthur thing doesn't seem like, it's not that side. It, you know, it to me, it seems just a more kind of, we want to do what we want to do. It's not to help people. It's because we want to do it, which seems a slightly different angle, but I might be wrong.
Yeah. I mean, what you know, to stick up for John MacArthur for a bit. I think there is never a perfectly safe option, and if someone wants to factor in the dangers of not meeting together, because, you know, Hebrews 10 says that we should not make it a habit of not meeting together, and there are spiritual dangers that need to be attended to as much as physical dangers. So, you know, even though, as I say, I think it was unwise, the certain decision that John MacArthur made, at least one of the things motivating him, I think, is that you can never be safe from everything that can be possibly, you know, classed as dangerous, and that there are spiritual dangers as well as physical dangers, and let's be attendant to those as well. Christopher Brown has commented on live chat, "What? We're not the first. We're not the first to have encountered pestilence, but I thought these times were unprecedented." And then Liza Whitehead has commented, "I miss precedented times."
Absolutely.
Bring back precedented times, please. But yes, let's give grace to one another, because I mean, my intention in raising the John MacArthur issue is to say actually that there is some courage there in John MacArthur that I do admire, even though I think the wisdom is lacking, and I think theologically, if he's going to say, wait, what are you laughing about?
No, I just.
It's a wonderful paused screen you've got there, Paul, with your eyes closed. We'll get Paul back in a second, but I mean, I think the thing about I think if John MacArthur doesn't think that the government has any jurisdiction whatsoever, in terms
keep
of,
getting cut off.
You keep getting cut off. It's not me.
Am I back now?
You're back now? You're back. What were you saying, Paul?
I think it says something about my contribution to the livecast that I can actually dip.
And you're just not noticed. Yep, not noticed at all. Let me finish off the point while Paul's reception catches up with him. But
been an out like this and largely.
So I think the idea that Caesar has a sphere of authority. Actually, there's sort of a twofold sphere of authority that Christ is Lord of the secular realm as well as of the church realm, but also Caesar can make all sorts of stipulations on the safety requirements. As I've said, do you have enough emergency exits? Do you have enough disabled access? Do you have enough toilets for the capacity of the building? Do you have health and safety stipulations adhered to in your kitchen, etc., etc., etc. So I think there are some things that are lacking there in John MacArthur's response, but I do think the courage that I see in him, I see reflected beautifully and wisely in someone like Jackie Lam, who is dealing in a Hong Kong situation in which the authorities that could clamp down have are not trying to adhere to the U.S. Constitution at all. And yet, I think he's seeking to be wise and to love neighbor, and I think he's seeking to uphold the stuff in Romans 14 and 15 that we really need to cling on to at this time. That whatever privileges we have are to be used for the service of others, and that's what I hope we take from this. Well, with all sorts of reception issues and internet buffering issues, I think we should probably draw stumps there, Paul. But bam, yeah,
just about,
just about
here.
Yeah, just about here. Well, guys, we are going on holiday for the next 2 weeks, so we won't have a live cast for the next 2 weeks. But do stay tuned for a fascinating conversation I had with Tapani Simiyoki, who is a Lutheran pastor here in the UK, and who I think he's the first pastor to have communion. Coming out of lockdown, and but we talk about far more deep and profound things than that. We talk about Lutheranism. We talk about what is the difference between just being a Luther fanboy and actually inheriting the rich tradition of Lutheranism. And there's lots of different truth bombs that he's going to explode on you. So do stay tuned for that. We've also got another couple of videos coming out. But do we trust you, Paul? Do we trust your connection so that you can let people know how people can get in touch with us?
I don't know. Can you even hear me?
Yes.
Am I good? Okay, so get in touch. All the usual avenues. Speaklife.org.uk is our website. You can contact us through there, or you can find us on Facebook and Instagram and Twitter, kind of all the major social media feeds. So you can contact us through there. You can find us on YouTube, obviously, Speak Life UK. If you search for our channel there, you can find all the videos, all the resources that we've got. And yeah, I mean, that's pretty much everything, isn't it?
That is everything. Guys, we hope you have a wonderful next couple of weeks, and we'll see you on the other side. God bless. See you later.
Take care.